Okay, let's jump right in because this is a real head-scratcher. I want you to picture a country that is, and I mean this literally, sitting on top of a sea of black gold, more oil than any other nation on the entire planet. But at the very same time, its economy has completely collapsed. It just doesn't add up, right? How is that even possible? Well, that's the paradox we're going to unpack.
The whole story really starts with this one absolutely mind-boggling number, 303 billion barrels. Just let that sink in for a second. That's the size of Venezuela's proven oil reserves. We're talking about the largest on Earth. Yep, even more than Saudi Arabia. It's something like 17% of the entire planet's known supply. It's just immense.
You know, with that kind of unbelievable wealth right under your feet, you'd think you'd have one of the richest, most successful countries in the world. But instead, Venezuela is trapped in this absolute nightmare of poverty, chaos, and hyperinflation. So what on earth went so spectacularly wrong? That, right there, is the $303 billion question.
Well, the first big piece of this puzzle, and this is super important to get, is in the oil itself. Because you see, not all crude oil is created equal. Not by a long shot. The specific kind of oil that Venezuela has so much of presents a huge technical challenge. Okay, so this slide really lays it all out. On one side, you've got your light, sweet crude. That's the good stuff. It flows easily, almost like water, it's low in sulfur, and it's pretty cheap to turn into gasoline. And then you have what Venezuela is sitting on. Extra heavy, sour crude. Sour just means it's packed with sulfur, which is a real pain to get rid of. And extra heavy? Seriously? Just think about pouring a glass of water versus trying to pour molasses that's been sitting in the fridge. That's the difference we're talking about. So when we say extra heavy, we are not kidding. It's an official classification for oil that is so incredibly dense, it's basically tar. Forget what you see in the movies. This stuff is closer to asphalt than the liquid black gold you're picturing. You can't just drill a hole and pump it out. It takes a totally different and way more expensive set of tools just to get it out of the ground.
And all that extra work adds up to enormous costs. This number right here, this is the killer. Over $80. That's the break-even price. That's the point where you stop losing money to produce one single barrel of this stuff. Now compare that to light crude, which might cost, say, 20 to 40 bucks a barrel to get. This makes Venezuela's whole operation incredibly fragile. If the global price of oil drops below $80, they are literally burning cash on every barrel they produce.
So you've got this technical problem, this really high cost of production. It was like a ticking time bomb. Sure, it was manageable when oil prices were sky high, but it built the entire country's economy on a really fragile foundation. And that foundation was about to get completely shattered by a perfect storm of political and economic disasters. And you can really see how it all fell apart in 3 distinct blows. It was like a 1-2-3 punch. First, back in 2007, the government just nationalized the whole industry, seizing billions of dollars in assets from foreign companies like Exxon. Predictably, that scared away all the outside money and expertise. Then, in 2014, bam! Global oil prices crashed, which just destroyed the profitability of their expensive operations. And the final nail in the coffin, starting in 2017, heavy US sanctions cut them off from all the money, tech, and even the spare parts they needed to keep the lights on. And the result of that perfect storm? Just look at this. It's a catastrophic collapse. I mean, from a peak of pumping 3.5 million barrels of oil every single day back in the 90s, production just fell off a cliff, down to around 700,000. The entire economic engine of the country just seized up and died. And this isn't just about numbers on a chart. This slide shows the devastating, very real human cost. The country's GDP shrank by an incredible 75%. Hyperinflation got so out of control that it hit over 1,000,000%. Can you even imagine that? People were literally using wheelbarrows of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. The result? Over 8 million people have fled the country, creating one of the largest refugee crises in modern history.
And this quote, wow. It tells you everything you need to know about the level of desperation. When the US indicted President Maduro on narco-terrorism charges, some citizens actually celebrated in the streets. Not because they wanted foreign intervention, but because things had gotten so unbelievably bad that any action against the government felt like the only sliver of hope they had left.
You know, there's actually a name for what happened here. Economists call it the resource curse, and it's a wild paradox where having immense natural wealth, like oil, actually leads to ruin. For Venezuela, oil was everything, 95% of the country's income. And instead of reinvesting that money, it was lost to corruption. Skilled experts were fired for political reasons, and the whole infrastructure was just left to rust and fall apart. Venezuela is the poster child for the resource curse. So what happens when a country with the world's biggest oil reserves completely implodes? Well, with its main industry in ruins and its government on shaky ground, Venezuela has turned into something else entirely. A stage, a geopolitical playground for world powers, and they all have their own competing agendas. So, who are the big players on the stage? Well, for the United States, it's a mix of things: regional stability, the drug trade, and of course, access to all that oil. For China, it's about securing energy for itself and protecting the billions it loaned to Venezuela. Russia? Well, Russia sees a golden opportunity to gain influence right in America's backyard. And for Iran, another country under heavy US sanctions, Venezuela is a natural ally against a common enemy.
So in the middle of all this geopolitical chess, a really risky idea has started to surface: a massive foreign investment plan to revive the oil industry. But the skepticism is just off the charts. After having billions of dollars worth of equipment and assets just taken, the CEO of ExxonMobil flat out called the country uninvestable. And honestly, can you blame them? Rebuilding that level of trust is a monumental, maybe even impossible task.
And yet the potential prize is so enormous that these talks have reportedly been happening behind closed doors. And this brings us to the climax of the whole story: two very different, very high-stakes paths that could determine not just Venezuela's future, but could send shockwaves across the entire global economy. So the first path is this potential revival plan. We are talking about an infusion of over $100 billion. The plan is incredibly ambitious. First, it would demand ironclad security guarantees and a total end to sanctions. In return, a flood of U.S. capital and technology would pour in to fix the shattered system. The short-term goal? Quickly ramp up oil production. The long-term dream? To put Venezuela back on the map as a top global oil giant. So let's just put these two paths side by side, because they could not be more different. Path 1 is cooperative. It's a multi-billion-dollar plan based on rebuilding trust and stability. Path 2, well, that's the extreme option some analysts have considered: a direct military intervention to force regime change and secure the oil fields. While it might work in the long run, the immediate fallout would be absolute chaos, massive instability, furious backlash from Russia and China, and a humanitarian crisis that would make the current one look small. So why should any of this matter to you and me? Because if they could actually bring millions of barrels of Venezuelan oil back online, it wouldn't just be a local story. A flood of new supply could push global oil prices down, maybe by 10, even 20%. For all of us, that can mean cheaper gas at the pump. For the whole economy, it could help cool down inflation. And on the world stage, it could seriously weaken the influence of countries like Russia and Iran, whose power depends on high oil prices. And that's really what it all boils down to. That's the ultimate question here. Is trying to revive Venezuela's oil industry a golden opportunity, a chance to stabilize the world economy and lower prices for everyone? Or is it just a foolish gamble, risking billions on a country with a long, dark history of corruption and broken promises? The answer, whatever it ends up being, is going to shape our world for decades to come.
From war zones to oil disputes between the US and Venezuela, we bring you the stories that matter. If you value this content, please like, share, and subscribe.